Well, assuming infinite gold, a fully capped Kayle board will be any other late game comp in my experience, even for Invokers pre-nerf, because you can easily tech in 4 Mystics. Also, I find it ridiculously fun to watch Kayle 1v9 after she ascends. So this is an example of a level 8 Kayle board. The entire purpose of the comp is to stall until Kayle ascends and can 1v9. Every unit here provides either a defensive trait such as Mystics, Ironclad, Knights, or Redeemed, or it provides some sort of stall mechanic, such as Rail Shield, Taric Heal, Kindred Ult. Legionnaire is not needed because Kayle doesn't heal off the trait, and I would rather have an extra frontline unit than the extra attack speed, so she can ascend safely. So there is some flexibility with the units. For example, a Garen or a Darius 2-star should always replace a Nautilus. You lose 2 Ironclad, but the trade-off is worth it. At level 9, I usually add in another Mystic for 4 Mystics, Rise to Lulu, especially if the lobby is heavy AP. A lot of endgame comps are, because there are carry units such as Heimer, Teemo, Kayle, and Vel'Koz. If the lobby isn't heavy AP, a level 9 board that I generally run is 4 Knights instead of 4 Mystics, and it looks something like this. This type of comp with the 4 Knights is especially crucial into Vayne carry, which is rare but sometimes you see. Because most of Vayne's damage is true damage, running an extra Ironclad or Mystic doesn't really do anything with the resistance, but having flat damage reduction from Knights allows you to win the matchup. Note that 6 Redeemed is a bait, and I have never played 6 Redeemed Kayle. You have to run too many bad units such as Aatrox or Leona when you can just run 5 costs like Garen or Darius instead. For the early game, I usually try to play 3 Draconic if I hit it early. Hitting 3 Draconic before Krugs is almost always a guaranteed top 4 because you get so much extra gold. Even if I hit 3 Draconic as late as stage 3-3, I oftentimes put it in still because the plan is a fast day anyway, but it depends on how strong the lobby is and whether I can greet it or not. I almost always pre-level to 4 at stage 2-1 and pre-level to 5 at stage 2-5. The only exception is if I can make 10 gold. I usually prefer making 10 gold over pre-leveling to 5. This is the ideal early game board with Varus as the item holder. If you hit this at stage 2-1, enjoy the guaranteed first. Obviously you can't get this start every game, not even 1 out of every 20 games. Here are some more realistic examples of level 5 boards that I might run. These aren't templates that you should be trying to go for because they aren't the best boards, but also they're not the worst. I'm trying to make them look realistic so you can play stronger boards than these if you hit them in your games. So this first example is using Kalista as the item holder and building the comp around Kalista Aatrox pair. Here I added a random Syndra for 3 Redeemed. In this example, I have Vayne as the item holder. You can add in a Knight over Gragas or add in a Knight at level 6. Vayne isn't the best early game carry unit because she got nerfed pretty hard coming from PBE. So generally I would look to replace her with a Varus. Or if I can choose between Vayne or Kalista carry, early game I would always choose Kalista. Here's an example using Ziggs as an item holder. Other item holders for Kayle include like Brand, Yasuo, Riven, really just any, because the items are pretty flexible. You should always be looking to aggressively make gold thresholds, so if you can sell units to make like 10 or 20 gold, always look to do that unless it's like a really good pair. You should be able to hit level 7 around Wolves, which is stage 3-7, with 40 plus gold if you played it correctly. In 99% of my games, I never roll before level 8. A lot of people are rolling down at level 7 nowadays with the increased chance of hitting 4 costs, but because we're looking for Kayle, a 5 cost carry, there's no point to rolling at 7. I level to 8 at stage 4-5 in most of my games. Some games, if I'm really high roll, I can actually afford to level to 8 at stage 4-2 after the armory and still have like 50 gold left over. And some games where I'm behind in gold, I level to 8 at 5-1, but those games are pretty rare. Depending on my HP and board strength, I can either look to roll it down or greed and fast 9. In the vast majority of my games, I do have to roll down at level 8, especially because most people are rolling down at level 7 nowadays, so you will be comparatively very weak if you don't roll down level 8. However, in some very high roll games where you are 70 plus HP with like fully upgraded units, you can skip the level 8 roll down and just go straight to 9. When you're rolling down level 8, you're obviously looking for Kayle, but also hold any Aphelioses, Dravens, or Vel'Kozes, because a 2-star of any of those units can hold Kayle items passively until you hit Kayle. I'll talk about Kayle items in a bit, so just trust me on this, and remember that Aphelios, Draven, and Vel'Koz are units that you should be holding as you do your level 8 roll down. Key 5 costs that you want to look out for as you're rolling down are Kayle, Kindred, and either God King, so Garen or Darius. If you hit a Kayle at level 8, she's actually better than a 2-star Aphelios, Draven, or Vel'Koz, so I would, if you like made items and put them on the Aphelios, Draven, or Vel'Koz, I would sell that unit and then put the items on Kayle. But the general rule of thumb is to just roll until you're stable, and that's very lobby dependent. Usually a 2-star Aphelios, Draven, or Vel'Koz will stabilize you until you reach level 9, but if it doesn't, then you just have to keep rolling for Kayle at level 8. In these games where you're stuck donkey rolling for Kayle, it's not really possible to hit level 9, and usually you just play for a top 4. Best in slot Kayle is Guardian Angel, Guinsoo's Rageblade, and a healing item, which can either be regular or Shadow Hodge, or a Gunblade. Regular Hand of Justice has a 50% chance of not healing, but it doesn't matter too much in my experience, so don't sweat it if you can't make a Shadow Hodge. I would rather focus on the other items than trying to force a Shadow Hodge. You need GA for survivability, Guinsoo's for attack speed and therefore damage, and Hodge or Gunblade for sustain. So in games where you can't make one of these items, think about an item that can somewhat provide you with what you're missing. So for example, if you don't have a GA, then maybe an RFC or a Trap Claw might add some survivability to Kayle. If you're missing Guinsoo's, then maybe like a Shadow Giant Slayer or a Jord Gauntlet will provide you with some damage. In starting carousels, I prioritize either Bow or Rod because Guinsoo's Slam early is really good due to how long the fights take, basically at all stages of the game, especially the early game. It also saves you a lot of HP. It's also probably the single most flexible offensive item in the game right now. After I get Guinsoo's, I usually prioritize Hand of Justice over the Guardian Angel because Guardian Angel is pretty useless early game. So, for example, if I get a Bow, Chain Vest, and Gauntlet as my starting 3 items, I would instantly think that's a Bow for Guinsoo's, a Chain Vest for GA, and a Gauntlet for Hand of Justice, meaning I would be looking for Rod, Sword, and Tear in armories and carousels. After you get your 3 Kayle items, the rest of the items can literally all be defensive because she's the only damage carry that you need. Tanks and tank items are really good this set, so definitely don't be afraid to slam any tank items. For example, cloaks and belts aren't needed for Kayle items, so it's completely fine to slam a Declaw or Warmogs. One really good item is Redemption. Backline Redemption on a Kindred or Ashe is probably a best in slot item for this comp, not only for the healing, but also the damage reduction on AoE abilities. Late game there are a lot of random AoE abilities like Heimer, Teemo, Vel'Koz, Karma to name a few, and getting damage reduction on those abilities really helps your Kayle survive. So to recap, I heavily prioritize Guinsoo's Rageblade, Hand of Justice, and Guardian Angel in that order. Then after I get those items, I usually look for stuff like Backline Redemption, tank items. You don't need more damage. Garen 2 or Darius 2 with Warmogs, Declaw, and Bramble, for example, will actually survive for so long and it'll buy your Kayle so much time. It's pretty insane. So when you're looking at these best in slot Kayle items, GA, Guinsoo's, and Hand of Justice, these items are passable on the 4-cost carries Draven, Aphelios, and Vel'Koz, but they're obviously not the best in slot by any means. Draven and Aphelios prefer like a raw attack damage item such as Deathblade, and Vel'Koz prefers a damage item such as Jord Gauntlet. That's why it's always better to sell a 2-star Draven, Aphelios, or Vel'Koz with these Kayle items and put them on a 1-star Kayle if you hit a 1-star Kayle. If you make Gunblade instead of Hand of Justice, then you kind of force yourself to run Vel'Koz because running Gunblade, Aphelios, or Draven is pretty troll. An option that you do have though is using spare item components to make a temporary AD item, so you can end up running GA, Guinsoo's, and the random AD item, and then just put Gunblade on like a unit you plan to sell. And then when you hit Kayle, you can just transfer GA, Guinsoo's, and Gunblade to Kayle. As for spat items, the best spat item in this comp is Ironclad because this gives you an extra 40 armor on all your units, or it's an extra 60 armor when you jump from Ironclad 2 to Ironclad 3. This allows them to stall for much longer, allowing Kayle time to ascend. Following that, a Legionnaire spat or Redeemed spat is okay. 2 Legionnaire gives Kayle some attack speed, and then having an extra Redeemed unit just gives her more resistances when the Redeemed unit dies because it spreads to all the still living units. However, even with a Redeemed spat, I would not look to run 6 Redeemed. I would just stick to the 4, which is Kayle, Lux, Rel, and the Redeemed spat unit that you choose. Default positioning looks something like this. Lux is in the opposite corner of Kayle, so she can be bait for assassins, Vel'Koz ult, Zyra ult, etc. Ashe is in the corner, so she can eat Threshhooks mostly. Plus, you want her next to Kayle to provide Kayle with 3 Redeemed. Note that I do have Kayle and Kindred together because sometimes Kindred griefs and walks away from Kayle, and if you have her in the corner where Ashe is currently, then she might not be in the Kindred ulti, so I look to put them next to each other. A lot of times in the early and mid game, I might slam an aura item like Zeke's, a Chalice, or Redemption and put it on Ashe because Ashe is in the final comp anyway. And in this positioning, if I have Zeke's Ashe, only Kayle benefits from it, but that's okay and completely fine. It's not really worth greeting the Zeke's or Chalice value on the Kindred as well, and then messing up your positioning, so it's fine to just only provide it to Kayle in this example. Best case scenario, you have enough gold so you can remake the Ashe, and then you can just put the aura item on Kindred, providing the Kindred with the stats. But if you can't do that, it doesn't really matter. So Taric is in the front line, or Taric is in the middle of the front line, and this provides Verdant buff to every unit. You can place Rel behind Taric actually, because she charges forward with the Cavalier passive anyway. So this allows her to get Verdant and then still move to the left of Morgana when the fight begins. If you know that you're playing against a 4 or 6 assassin comp, clumping up is your best bet. So just doing something like this is usually enough to just win the matchup. A lot of times though, you're not really playing against a full assassin comp, you're playing against a single assassin in for example, a Aphelios carry comp or a Draven carry comp. So there would be a Frozen Heart Diana or just a random Viego. In that case, positioning like this is usually good enough. You just put a random melee unit, so usually Garen, Darius, or Nautilus in front of your Kayle, and this allows this unit to just tank the Diana or the Viego when it jumps, and it leaves your backline safe. And it's not really the biggest deal to actually dodge Diana. I mean, obviously if you can, you should do it, but I wouldn't try to grief your positioning doing last minute swaps, because you have to move 4 units, whereas they just have to move the assassin. Because you have Verdant 3, the Frozen Heart doesn't really matter, and then a lot of times when the Diana ults, you still have Verdant anyway, so your units don't actually move. Of course, you should always look to switch sides to dodge stuff like Vel'Koz ult, Zyra ult, Volibear ult. So a note about Shrouds and Zephyrs. A lot of times I don't actually care to dodge either of them because Kayle is manaless. So shrouding Kayle doesn't do anything. Shrouding Kindred obviously isn't that great, but I would still prefer that Kindred gets shrouded and stays next to Kayle, rather than have Kayle and Kindred separated, because you want Kayle to be in the Kindred ulti. And if Kindred's ulting on the other side of the map, not next to Kayle, it doesn't really do much anyway, because it's a Kayle carry comp, and you're basically trying to stall the comp for her. Zephyr hitting Kayle also doesn't matter, because she actually ascends when she's Zephyred. So she actually doesn't do too much damage in the first 5 seconds of the fight anyway. So you're not really missing out on any like crucial damage. And then when she comes down from the Zephyr, she can just start. She already ascended her first stage, so it's fine. And it like it keeps her safe from a lot of like damage at the beginning of the round anyway, so it doesn't really matter. I will be linking a Kayle game with commentary in the description of this video. I'm going to try to choose a game that I got first in, but also it's not one where I, high roll ridiculously. I want it to be like a realistic game that I have. I will be talking throughout this game, and I'll be like talking about my thought process. The commentary won't be live, but I will explain all my actions and what I'm thinking if you want an in-depth example of how I play this comp. Thanks for watching.